Hey guys, James from TechLens. So this is probably going to be the most important video that I've ever made on this channel. You see, today I want to investigate the current state of GPU pricing and figure out who or what is actually responsible for these ridiculous price increases. Then at the end of this video, we will talk about what you should expect moving forward and if and when pricing will ever return to normal. And if I'm being honest, I'm actually a little bit nervous about making this video, as it might be the stupidest decision that I've ever made from a business perspective. There's a pretty real possibility that I might be blacklisted by everyone for the things that I'm about to say. But you know what? I honestly believe that if you make this type of objective content without being honest and without integrity, it's not content worth watching. And I'm pretty sure that most of you feel the same way. But you guys also might have to help me reach out to Hardware Unboxed if I get unfairly treated because of honest content. They seem to have a bit of experience with this. So why is GPU pricing so broken? Which companies are taking advantage of the situation, and when will things get better? These are the questions that we're going to answer today. Let's get into this. So, a bit of background and a recap on our current situation, as it's been over a year since the launch of the RTX 3080 back on September 17, 2020. But this was supposed to be the generation of extreme value. We were seeing big price decreases with performance increases across the board. Furthermore, this was also AMD's return to competition at the high end. This was the promise. This is what we were told, and this was meant to be the generation that people should upgrade to. So it's no wonder why people feel seriously upset right now when GPUs are being sold for much higher than the launch price. And no, I'm not talking about the scalper market, I'm talking about cards sold new from official retailers. But why is that? How did it get that way? Yes, crypto, yes, scalpers. We talk about this a lot during our monthly GPU crisis and availability update videos, which I highly suggest that you check out below if you haven't already, but also not crypto and not scalpers. Let me explain. You see, the current crypto market and scalpers on eBay should actually have zero impact on GPU MSRP, because those are things that happen after the sale of the product. Yet somehow many board partner cards are currently being sold by retailers like Newegg and Best Buy for like 50% over their launch price in terms of the RTX 3000 series. And when it comes to something like the Radeon 6000, pricing is even worse, and more like up to 100% over their launch MSRP. So why is that? Who or what is causing these ridiculous price increases? Well, that's what this video is going to cover. And if you've followed the channel for any length of time, you know me, it's going to be a data-driven, analytical approach to the topic, not rumors, not hearsay. So we're going to investigate the validity of the claims being thrown around the internet as to why pricing has increased. Things like increased components, shipping costs, chip shortage, tariffs, and calculate the absolute maximum cost GPU pricing should have risen by because of these factors, to see if it's comparable to the actual price increase of GPUs at a retailer level, or if something more sinister is going on. Then what I want to do with you guys is answer the question, if the things that are allegedly causing these price increases get better, will pricing get better and return to normal? But first I want to show you some examples of these massive price increases, as they'll be pertinent to our investigations in this video. So this is my Excel sheet that has taken me an extremely long time to compile, mainly because manufacturers have been super cagey about disclosing their MSRP for their cards, which you would be if, well, let's take a look at the rest of the sheet. Here we have known tariff price increases, which we will speak about in a bit more detail later. And then we have current retailer pricing in my region right here, from Best Buy, Newegg, and Micro Center. People get so surprised when I tell them that I live in the US. I understand, it's the accent. But as you can see from this sheet, it is going to be US dollar focused. In fact, it may be even more relevant, showing egregious pricing to markets outside the US. We'll speak about this a bit more in a bit. But the observations that I want you to take note of right now is the GPU launch price right here, and the current retailer pricing right here. It's worth noting that the cards on the left only state if they're an OC or a non-OC model in brackets right there. And I've added what cards we're comparing to in the notes section right here. So bear in mind, as you can see here, there may be a plus or minus 0.5% based on whether we're comparing between an OC model and a non-OC model. And in compiling this data, I've also tried to filter out listings that I think are old or using old pricing. As you can see right here from the Gigabyte Gaming OC, we have a listing for $999.99 and $1079.99. I'll be taking the higher listing price because I believe that to be more truthful for the current situation. So reflecting on this data, the main questions I have are, why has pricing for the Founders Editions cards not increased? Why are the EVGA cards not inflated as much compared to everything else? And why have the cheapest cards from MSI and Zotac increased by the highest percentage? These are the things that I'm aiming to answer, and the answers are likely pretty cynical. So to do this, we need to investigate the impact of the things that you've been told as to why GPU pricing is so high right now, and see if they are actually true. Because of the global pandemic, there is truth to the claim that global shipping costs have increased, but likely not as much truth as you're being led to believe. If we take a look at some of the data collected by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, we can see that in the examples that they give, global shipping costs have risen astronomically. But the thing that you have to bear in mind is that we're talking about a 40-foot shipping container when we're talking about these costs. That is a colossal amount of GPUs that can fit into that. Unfortunately, we can actually estimate the shipping cost per GPU. With a quick Google search, we can see that a standard 40-foot shipping container has an internal volume of 2,350 cubic feet. And to really give them the benefit of the doubt, let's take the dimensions of the largest GPU box that I currently have on hand, the MSI RTX 3080 Gaming Z Trio, the last of the 3 GPUs that I managed to get from the Micro Center raffle video that I did recently. This is a big boy box, so it really gives them the benefit of the doubt. And hell, let's be even more generous and add an extra 10% for additional packaging, while also using the highest amount that I've seen for shipping costs, as reported by the Wall Street Journal at $24,000 for a next day shipping container. That also includes inland distribution costs. Bear in mind that there's no way that this would be the actual cost or relative cost if they're only buying a portion of a container through a third party. So we're being extremely generous in our calculation. But on top of that, let's take our generosity to the next level and say that shipping a GPU was previously free for manufacturers, which it absolutely wasn't. But even if it was free, the difference between free and the highest shipping cost that I can find would only mean an additional shipping cost of just under $4.50 per GPU, which, given the amount of media attention around how recent high shipping costs have inflated the price of GPUs, $4.50 really doesn't seem like a significant impact compared to how high retailer pricing is right now, and seems pretty inconsequential. Nevertheless, it's not the only claim to increase costs, and we will save that number for later. Increased material and chip costs actually go hand in hand, as they come from shortages in the bill of materials for manufacturing a GPU. So to break down the cost increase, let's start with the materials and the componentry before we talk about the actual graphics processor that lives in the heart of the GPU. And again, because of the global pandemic, the price of everything that makes up a GPU, we're talking copper, plastic, aluminium, even the PCBs, they've all increased in price. So again, let's overestimate this, give them the benefit of the doubt, and let's say that the weight of a GPU was 100% made out of the most valuable material in that list, which is copper. So let's take the MSI Gaming Z Trio 3080 again, a card that weighs just under 3.4 pounds. So the highest price that copper has ever been was back in May this year at almost $4.78 per pound. This means that if the entire GPU's weight was made out of the most valuable material the GPU is made from, at the highest price that it's ever been in the last 25 years, compared to the lowest price it has ever been in the past 25 years, we would expect to see a price increase of $14.35. And let's say that GDDR6X is 1.5 times the price of GDDR6 and has seen a 20% cost increase because of the pandemic. Both of those I think are pretty generous, given the fact that NVIDIA might legitimately be Micron's only customer for GDDR6, and it likely isn't 1.5 times more expensive. Nevertheless, that's a rough increase of $36 for a 3080 and $86.50 for a 3090, given it has 2.4 times the memory. Let's also go ahead and add an extra $25 for excess costs in power delivery, fans, SMDs, packaging. So in my opinion, we're being super generous and looking at a price increase of about $80 for a 3080 and $130 for a 3090. And for simplicity, we're also going to say $80 for a 6800 XT, 6900 XT, as they use more memory than the 3080, but it is cheaper memory, and that roughly aligns with our calculation. But also bear in mind that this would be less for a card that doesn't have as robust cooling or power delivery. But when it comes to the actual processor on a GPU, the thing that you have to realize is that NVIDIA and AMD don't actually make GPU cores, they design them. That means that the NVIDIA GA102 core that sits at the heart of something like the Asus ROG Strix 3080 isn't even made by NVIDIA. It's manufactured by Samsung using their 8nm node. And similarly, the RDNA 2 cores using AMD's current 6000 series GPUs are manufactured by TSMC using their 7nm node. And both Samsung and TSMC have a plethora of other customers competing for allocation across their node stack. Because of this, it does make it extremely difficult to calculate the cost of a standalone chip, as 1, AMD and NVIDIA only know the true cost of what they pay, and 2, the cost can allegedly vary between order quantity, order urgency, process node, and potentially even client tier. But nevertheless, we do have some information to go on. As reported by Tech Power Up, the alleged cost of a 7nm node wafer is just over $9,300 per 12-inch wafer. This is what's used to make the Radeon 6000 GPU cores. So even if we calculate a 60% yield, which is 10% lower than most reports regarding TSMC 7nm, while also oversizing each Navi 21 chip, would cost about $163. Screw it, let's even run that up to $200 per chip to really give them the benefit of the doubt. So now that we have our baseline starting number, how much do we think TSMC are currently charging over that for the price increase due to the pandemic? Well, several reports state that at the time of filming is about 20% more because of supply constraints. So let's assume that our $200 number doesn't have any markup from TSMC already, which it honestly might. And on top of that, let's even say that they want 30% instead of 20. So for the sake of proving a point and accounting for any unforeseen costs, that means that with our massively inflated pricing, we're only looking at an extra $60 per Navi 21 chip, a Radeon 6900 XT, 6800 XT. And for the sake of calculation, let's say similar for the 3080, 3090 on Samsung's 8nm node. The only reason why I'm comfortable doing this is that TSMC allegedly charge about 20% more than their competitors. So what this means is, in terms of increased bill of materials, we're looking at a max price increase of about $140 for a 3080, 6800 XT, and 6900 XT, and about $190 for 3090, given everything that we have just overcalculated. But there's one last thing that I want to talk to you about. One last topic before we find out if the numbers that we're getting are even close to the numbers that you're being asked to pay. Import tariffs of between 10 and 25% did come into effect in early 2021 that affected many computer components and other items coming from China. It's just that GPU availability was already an issue, so it was the most reported on at the time. And when this happened, a lot of board partners understandably had to increase their prices. But by how much? Well, Asus released a press statement as reported by Video Cards, stating that they're increasing their prices due to, and I quote, reflect increases in costs for components, operating costs, and logistical activities, plus a continuation of import tariffs. So Asus, if you read that again, have directly said that they are increasing their price to not only reflect an increase in import tariffs, but to also encompass at least some of what we have literally just calculated, which is an important note for our upcoming calculations. Furthermore, both EVGA and Zotac have their own web stores, where the product pages for these items haven't actually changed. So thank God for the Wayback Machine. You guys offer such a valuable service. So let's go back to our spreadsheet. So here I want to draw your attention to tariffs imposed back in January 2021. So what that means is that it's not going to affect the 3060, 3070 Ti, etc., because they were released after that date. But for the cards where it does affect it, you'll see tariff price increase difference, tariff increase by percentage, and the source of it, whether it was from Video Cards or Wayback Machine through EVGA or Zotac store. And as you can see, all of these are a nice marketable number. It is increased by $70, $100, $50. It's not like $62.34. But what that shows is a big difference in percentage. Even within the same brand, same product line, same silicon, just in a different package, which is a little bit suspicious. And as you can see right here from the Zotac Twin Edge OC and Twin Edge OC White Edition, there's a big difference in percentage, one being 14%, the other one being 20%. And I don't know if you guys know this, I assume you probably do, but the tariffs really don't care if the card is a white edition, so something is pretty sus. Additionally, EVGA is the only one that's consistently within a single percentage within the same product line. So what that tells me is that theirs is a bit more true to cost compared to other manufacturers. And then when we go up the product stack to the 3080, 3090, something gets a little bit interesting. We can see that the MSRP increase from tariffs was under 10%, which must actually be lower than the tariff increase imposed. Now that could be for two reasons. EVGA actually split the manufacturing between their Taiwan and China facilities, so maybe they can offset some of the costs of their Chinese GPUs with their Taiwanese ones. And another thing to consider is that EVGA might actually have some sort of incentive directly with NVIDIA to keep the cost of their cards lower for consumers. I honestly wouldn't be surprised given how closely NVIDIA and EVGA work together. So for the sake of our calculation, we're going to average the known increase MSRP around the time of the tariffs without the numbers from EVGA. Again, being super generous. But another thing that I want to highlight, and what this doesn't explain, is why I've had so many people from all over the world tell me that prices increased sharply at the beginning of the year within their region. These are import tariffs specific to the US. US import tariffs should have no effect on any other country's pricing unless the item hit a US port of entry to get there. The only examples of this would be something like if the item was bound for Canada or Mexico and they had to go through a US port of entry to get there. But going via the US obviously wouldn't happen for most of the world. So again, pretty sus. So it's important to note that we've been primarily using data for high-end GPUs. But to recap our increased cost investigation, we way overestimated the increased shipping costs, even going as far as to compare if the shipping was previously free. Then we way overestimated the increased cost of materials and chip costs by materials use, materials pricing, the size of the chip, and even the chip manufacturing yield. To then finally use the average price increase that a major manufacturer stated publicly includes some of what we've already calculated. But why have I done this calculation this way? It seems that I'm really giving the manufacturers and retailers a huge advantage in this calculation. Well, yes. The reason that I've done this is kind of twofold. Firstly, if the number that we come up with isn't higher than the current increase in sale price, it's fair to speculate that something else is going on. And secondly, there's likely to be someone in the comment section saying, "You forgot this." And that is fair. I've calculated this as best I can. But if this is you, you're not only going to have to justify how this not only makes up the price difference we see compared to our calculation, but also a significant margin more than that because of how generously we've overcalculated everything in the favor of the manufacturers and the retailers. So with that said, our data when it comes to product weight, chip size, etc. has been tailored towards the higher end products. And what that looks like for a 3080, a 6800 XT and a 6900 XT tier card is about $145 without tariffs and $255 with tariffs included. And then for the 3090, $190 without tariffs and $500 with tariffs. So let's take a look. Let's find out who's closest to this number and who's taking advantage from both a manufacturer and a retailer perspective. So I'm actually going to go a little bit rogue before we then take a look at the actual GPU data. Do you want to know which retailer is price gouging the most? Well, that's actually what I wanted to answer with these three columns that show retailer pricing. I'm sure Best Buy, Newegg and Micro Center will all say that their prices are set by the manufacturer, but that would be a lie because the prices between them often differ even for the same card, and Best Buy actually comes out consistently the worst price compared to Newegg and Micro Center. And Micro Center nearly always comes out cheaper than the other two. So if you wanted to know which US retailer was the most and the least consumer friendly from a cost perspective, that is your answer. So in this data, an interesting observation is that the Founders Editions and AMD reference cards remain basically the same price throughout. And honestly, I think this is because they would be admitting defeat on the MSRP argument and receive so much backlash from media and consumers if they raise their prices for those cards. So they're forced to keep them at the same price and trickle out cards to keep people at bay. They may even potentially be making a loss on them. But other than those examples, as you can see, only the EVGA cards consistently exceed their price increase targets, likely because of what we spoke about earlier in terms of manufacturing facilities and potential incentives. No other 3080 and two other 3090 cards in our list managed to hit their targets. And to reiterate, the target is $255 price increase with tariffs for a 3080, and if you're outside the US looking at your local retailer pricing, it's $145 without tariffs. Similarly, a $500 target with tariffs for a 3090 and $190 without, which Asus also manages to hit on two of their 3090 cards. So I'm going to come back to the most disgusting manufacturer pricing examples in a bit, but first let's take a look at the Radeon cards down below. It was a little bit more difficult to compile data for these, but even while being generous with the launch MSRP, by our calculations, these numbers are way above what they should be, especially for the liquid-cooled strict 6900 XT, although the water cooling aspect does add complexity. But what on earth is going on with some of those 6700 XT numbers? These cards were released after the tariffs and are cheaper to make, especially in terms of bill of materials, so that $145 target should be way overestimated. Yet the XFX Speedster has just blown through orbit and the MSI X2 is hovering somewhere in the atmosphere. But another thing that I want to consider whilst looking at this data and focusing my attention on AMD and NVIDIA, the companies, the thing that I want you guys to think about is when we were calculating the increased chip costs, we were calculating the cost from the fab to the client. The fab being TSMC and Samsung production facilities, and the clients in this situation being NVIDIA and AMD. So when board partners like Zotac, MSI and Gigabyte buy the GPU cores, NVIDIA and AMD would have already raised the price further. So board partners have to raise their prices to, at a minimum, match that, which at a minimum is what I'm sure they would tell you and what I'm sure they would like you to believe. But the problem is the numbers don't lie. And if that was the only reason, all of the cards within a product line like the 3090 would go up by a similar amount, which it isn't the case. This doesn't prove that AMD and NVIDIA haven't done this to an unreasonable level, it just proves that NVIDIA and AMD are not the sole reason for these price increases. The most egregious examples of these ridiculous price increases comes from MSI and Zotac's cheapest cards, the MSI Ventus X3 and the Zotac Trinity. Just look at those consistent price increases compared to everything else. The worst thing is, these are the reference cards with basic power delivery. arguably the cheapest to make, yet have increased in price disproportionately to other cards that are fundamentally more expensive. And in my experience from the many online and in-store drops that I've been a part of this year, these are the best stock cards. So it smells like they just jacked up the price for their cheapest cards the most and then just started making more of them. So this is really depressing. Not only are you having to battle against bots and scalpers, but you're also being price gouged before the GPU even hits the retailer, especially when we take a look at something like the MSI Ventus and Zotac Trinity cards. And then on top of that, after you've been price gouged before it even hits the stores, you're then clearly being taken advantage of by the retailer too in many instances. You can see this when we take a look at the price differences between Best Buy, Newegg and Micro Center. I do want to make clear though, I'm not saying that these price increases weren't necessary. Yes, there clearly have been legitimate reasons for GPU prices to be higher than their launch MSRP, but not by the amount that's currently being set. Like an additional $1,000 for the Zotac 3090 Trinity. Are you actually joking? That just smells like a company that only cares about profits and blatantly doesn't give a shit. So then, the question is, if tariffs went away, shipping, materials, chips, all of that goes back to normal, what will happen to the state of GPU pricing? Honestly, and I hate to tell you this, but I'm a realist giving you real information. And it's likely that if everything goes back to normal, nothing will change for quite some time. The thing that you have to remember is that for-profit companies are just that. They're for profit. Some may tell you that they're your friend, but honestly, it's a marketing tactic used to build brand loyalty so that you'll buy from them. Even the best, no questions asked, consumer-friendly warranty is designed in a way that you're more likely to buy one of their cards again. And because of that, because of everything that we've seen in the data that we're looking at today, if the costs of manufacturing start to decrease, they likely won't be passing that cost onto you. They'll be passing it onto their bank accounts for as long as possible. And unfortunately, as evidence of this, if you've been in tune with the PC hardware industry for more than even a few short years, you'll know that we've lived through things like this. Things like price fixing, which takes the cooperation of competitors to arbitrarily raise the price of components to fundamentally just extract more money from you. Some of you will remember the DRAM manufacturer price fixing a few years back. So honestly, and I might get into a bit of trouble for even saying this, but I think it's more likely that you'll be seeing issues with chip hoarding to artificially keep the prices high, and less likely that you'll be seeing any benefits from the global supply and logistical constraints being alleviated. So with that said, there's one last thing that's probably going to happen at this exact moment. Please subscribe.